So Preston had it, but I didn't get it. So,
oh, good.
Yeah. So now, though, I'm more concerned about it because the closer we get to the trip, I was hoping when he got it in January that if I was going to get it, I would get it then.
I understand.
I didn't try actually, we quarantined from each other. So he was in a hotel suite in our master bedroom.
Right. So I'm thinking I might try and just do some hard quarantine, those last 7 days or so before we leave, just for fear of making sure I don't miss out. All right. Mikkel, are we ready? If you could turn the light on in that room, I could see you better. Oh, there you go. He's giving me the clear. And Mikkel, do I need to leave my audio on my computer? Okay. I don't know if everybody else heard that. He said yes. Pardon? Yes. Angela's going to come. She has a few kind of logistical business things to share with us about the trip, and then we'll get into our discussion about things. I don't know if you...
Okay, it's funny.
She's down there.
Hey, here I am. All right, a couple things. I need a stool. All right, sorry about that. A couple things. This week, EO is going to put $125 charge on everyone's account for the COVID tests in Israel. So you can pay that up until we leave. For those of us going to Egypt, that's going to be a separate charge, and we'll pay there in cash. And one person said it's $50. One person said it's $100. So I would plan on $100 in hopes that it's $50. But I mean, they're arranging for all that. They'll get us to the testing site. I talked to someone who just got back from Israel, and she said that their tour group was the only group at all the sites. And she said that was great. They have started. So, when we get to the airport, they'll test us there at the airport. But my friend, so the rule is you either test negative, or in 24 hours, if you don't get that result back, then you're good to go. You have to quarantine 24 hours unless you have that negative test. But she had to wait, their group had to wait the 24 hours. They didn't get their test back. But because that's happening, EO said right now what they're doing is we have to test at the airport because Israel says we have to do that. But we're going to leave the airport, go straight to a different testing site. And they're going to test us there because those tests are coming back within a few hours. It's still, they said 125 is going to cover all that testing that we do in Israel. So that's nice because my friend missed, kind of the first day of the trip of touring. So, but we won't. So that's good news. And anything else, Gail? When I talked to you earlier today.
I do have another question, Angela. Yeah. What about when we're coming home? How much will we have to pay for that one?
Okay, that's the $50 or $100. That's that test.
Okay, but what about the going into Egypt?
Mm-hmm. So that's included in that 125.
Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the main thing.
Yeah,
and we don't know exactly the times yet.
We don't.
We talked about.
Yeah. So they yes. So we're not sure of all of our flights. They'll be close to what I had said earlier, but they actually released those flights because not everyone's flying out of Orlando. So we might be going with Lufthansa. I can't say that name, but we might be going with someone else. But he said they always try to book those very similar times. So we'll probably leave late afternoon on Friday, and then you come back similar to those flights that I had shared earlier. Any other questions before we get started?
I have one more quick question. Sorry.
You're good.
It says that we have to have that PCR within 72 hours.
Thank you. Yes. So that's 72 hours from when you leave the United States. So if our flight is into New York, then the 72 hours has to be from that point.
So
that makes sense.
That would mean when so is that on Friday evening?
So he said probably what we'll need to do is go Wednesday morning and get tested.
Wednesday morning. Okay.
Yeah. And if we do that other flight, that was Frankfurt, that means that you have to be 72 hours from that Frankfurt flight. So,
Hey,
which actually I guess is kind of better for us.
here we are next. We're
Also
on the video.
that's funny. And I asked about if it needs to be printed on the on our, the results, our passport number has to be on there. So they said that was a rule that they had, that it had to be printed on there from the company that, does the test, but they're not enforcing that rule. So the guy I talked to today had went and didn't have it pre-printed on there. So I need to ask Emma to see if hers was pre-printed, but he said everyone that they know is just writing it on there, but it is a rule that it's supposed to be printed from the testing company. So that's a non-answer for that question, really. But I think, they're saying writing in your passport number on there should be fine. Any other questions?
The $50 I missed, I just came
Oh,
in as you were talking about that.
Yeah,
Is
so that won't be for you. That's just
Oh,
that's in Egypt.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
All right. Thank you.
So Angela, is there a site there in Lakeland that we can get a test if we?
Yes. Well, yes, you can. I mean, yeah.
And
There
get
are lots of
results.
places here that we can go, and so yeah, if you're here, we can go together. We'll make an appointment and go together
And get results before we fly, right?
and get results before we fly. Yeah.
'Cause
And I
that
asked
was-
specifically where the EO people had went, because EO is actually in Lakeland, even though they do more tours in Israel than any other tour company, but they just happen to be in Lakeland, which is funny. So I asked them where they went so that we could, make an appointment there, because then we know that they got their results back, and it was just a Walgreens. So
that was the issue I had when I went to Guyana.
that's right.
I lost a day of touring because the test results didn't get back. I came back negative, but I didn't get back in time to get on the flight to
Right.
Guyana.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's better now. I mean, back then it wasn't that long ago, but it seemed like it was taken closer to that whole 3 to 5 days for those, because it is a PCR test you have to do. But all right. You're good?
I'm ready.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we're ready to go to the slide. All right, beloved. It's good to be with everybody. Hey, Carol. All right. Here comes the slide. Let's see. I'll go back to the speaker. All right, so what we're looking at here is the Mount of Olives, which of course you've heard a lot about in Scripture. This is kind of on Mount Moriah, looking east. And so there's a valley kind of in between, like you're looking kind of at a hill in front of you. You kind of look up the hill. So we're kind of standing up on Mount Moriah, where Abraham didn't sacrifice Isaac. And then we're looking across, east towards the Mount of Olives. So all of that kind of concrete that you see there are actually tombs. So in the ancient world, and for that matter, in the contemporary world, the way in which remains are kept in this culture is that you're kind of temporarily buried until your body decays and there's only your bones, and then your bones are collected and put in an ossuary, kind of like a stone box. And so families for generations and generations and generations have had these kind of tombs there. And so in the tombs, they'll just, if someone else dies, they'll come and put their bones in the box, and then just again and again and again and again. The idea is they all want to be there when the Messiah returns. So whether this is a practice of Jews. So most of all of those tombs that you see there are Jewish tombs. And then I don't know if I can move, Mikkel, if you could move the picture-in-picture to the right so that it's, there you go. And then that tower is a Church of the Ascension. It's a Lutheran church, actually. Depending on which gospel you read, it'll kind of tell different stories about the expectation of where Jesus was at the Ascension. Here is the expectation that this happened from the Mount of Olives. In fact, there is a place that's commemorated from the particular spot with which Jesus ascended. There's a little kind of indention in the rock. And some tour guides will tell you that's where Jesus left from. That's not true. So I've heard this said before when people like us, kind of devout Christian folk, go on a pilgrimage, particularly the more evangelical or kind of conservative Christian you are, the more I'm apt to hear this. They'll say, don't pay attention to the places that are commemorated, just pay attention to the land, like just absorb the land. In general, I have some sympathy for that this is not going to be like an X marks the spot. We know some things took place in Jerusalem, some things took place up by Galilee, some things took place down by the Dead Sea, some things took place in Bethlehem. So we'll be in the general area, but I don't want you to just dismiss the fact that the Christian church has commemorated these particular places for hundreds and hundreds, and some of them 1,000, 1,500, 1,800 years. There's something about the fact that these places have been sacred for Christians and have been places of worship for that long, that are kind of worthy of our attention and kind of celebration, independent of whether or not that's the square foot from which that particular event happened. So here's another picture of the Mount of Olives. This different time of year, you can tell it's quite a bit greener. So what you see to the far right there is those tombs. Jesus refers to the Pharisees at one point as a bunch of whitewashed tombs. So there you go, whitewashed tombs. Jesus was kind of picking on his fellow religious leaders at the time. So slightly north, you see quite a bit of greenery, and it should be pretty green when we're there. Early March is kind of on the end of the rainy season, and so it'll be greener maybe than I've ever seen it, because I've been there later in the year, and I've been there in November, I've been there in the summer, but I've never been there quite this early. So I'm kind of excited to see a bit more of this. This building to the bottom left, that is here, this 3 arches, that's the Church of All Nations. I almost called it All Saints, but then I realized that's where Kathy is a priest. That's a different church. That's here in Lakeland. So this is the Church of All Nations, and it is built over a piece of open bedrock. So when you go in there, unlike a traditional church where the middle of the church would have, I don't know, typical flooring and a pulpit or what have you, it's an open piece of bedrock, and they've put some railing around it. And this is in the vicinity of the Garden of Gethsemane. And that open piece of bedrock is the place that is commemorated as Jesus Gethsemane's prayer. And so this church has been built there, and it's a church that's used by a lot of different denominations and groups, the Orthodox, the Catholics, lots of different folks use it. It's a wonderful location. Hopefully it's not a trigger spot for Angela. She did misplace a couple of $1,000s once there, but luckily we found it. Or technically a priest found it and then gave it to her. So note to self. Sorry about that, calling you out. Now, this is up on the Mount of Olives now. Instead of standing kind of in Jerusalem, looking east toward the Mount of Olives, we are now standing on the Mount of Olives, looking west towards Jerusalem. And I know this is kind of at a good distance here, so it's hard to make too much out. But the large golden dome in the middle, you'll recognize, that's the Dome of the Rock. It is a Muslim shrine So it's not a mosque. It's not where they would hold particular prayers or worship, but I think shrine's probably the best term, a holy place. So it too is built over some open bedrock, and it's the highest point on that little hill or mountain that it's on. And that's the place that both Jews and Christians and Muslims would all commemorate as the spot where Abraham, again, found Isaac, but didn't sacrifice him. And that's why it's commemorated like this. It's also, at least in the Muslim faith, where they say that Muhammad ascended from. So like in Christianity, there's a belief that Jesus ascended. In Islam, there's belief that Muhammad ascended, and they believe he ascended from that spot. We won't go into the Dome of the Rock. Since the early 2000s, it's been restricted to Muslims only. And as far as I know, there are no Muslims going on our trip. If one of you were to happen to convert, please let me know, and I'll get you in the Dome of the Rock. But otherwise, we won't be going inside. I've been in years and years ago before that was a restriction. But in this location, generally, is also thought to be the place that the ancient sanctuary set, like the Temple of Solomon. So it might be a little hard to make out, but if you look at where the Dome of the Rock is, like that particular building, and if you go kind of to the left or right of it, you see the trees that are planted there. There's a couple little platforms. And if you keep going out, you can see that it kind of flattens off here to the left, or my left. Yeah, your left too. And there's a smaller dome there, that darker dome there. That is a mosque, Mosque Alaska. And that platform that it's built on is called the Temple Mount. So when it says like Jesus went to the temple, it doesn't necessarily mean the particular sanctuary building itself, but the larger temple complex. And that was built by Herod the Great and was pretty massive and impressive. And we'll talk more about various parts of it. But the corner, I wish I could show my pointer here. You guys can't see my pointer on the screen, can you? If I move my cursor around? No. Okay. Well, if you come down to if you start at the Golden Dome and move to the left through the trees, you'll come to a little gray dome. Then if you trace the wall line back towards you, you'll come to the corner where the northwest wall hits an east-west wall. So right there. Mikkel's going to try and shift the picture for us so we can focus on this point. So this is the highest point of the Temple Mount over the Kidron Valley, which runs down here between the Mount of Olives where we're standing and the Temple Mount that we're looking at. Change. So when it says that Jesus stood on the temple and Satan tempted him to jump off. Oh yeah, you guys can kind of see that. Maybe I'll hold it still. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit. All right, it's right there. So that would have been the pinnacle of the temple. It wouldn't have been like on top of the church building, which is what I thought when I was a kid. I thought, what would Jesus be doing on top of the church anyway? Like fixing the steeple? Like that's a dangerous place to be. But yeah, that would have been the pinnacle of the temple. And something else, if you can switch back again, Mikkel. On the southern side of the Temple Mount would have been where your everyday Jew would have entered the temple, like if they were going to worship. And it was built, thank you. It was built in a way, let me show you that, like down here. So there's steps right here. They're called the teaching steps. Again, to kind of commemorate Jesus' teaching at the temple, except this might be more than just commemorating. These were the steps that anybody would have come in. Like the only other way to get in was the priest had a separate entrance on the west side, and the Roman military had a separate entrance on the north side. But the only way for anybody else to get in is through this south entrance on what is now called the teaching steps, named after Jesus. So we'll sit there and we'll read from the Gospels about Jesus kind of cleansing the temple. The construction is such that if you think of a modern day stadium and the way you kind of, sometimes when you enter, it's like you're almost subterranean and then you go up some steps and you step out and you kind of see the field. That's what it would have been like. Like you would have kind of gone in and up, up, up. And as you stepped out, you'd have been on the platform on the Temple Mount, it's called. And so with Jesus has turned over the table of the money changers, and if he's turned over the table of those who buy and sell pigeons, and he's preventing anyone from carrying anything through the temple, then up somewhere around where the Dome of the Rock is, at the altar of sacrifice, animal sacrifice has come to a standstill. And Jesus is now teaching about another way of being in the world that doesn't include killing animals, people, or anything else. There's no one or no thing you have to kill in order to worship God, according to Jesus. And he knows. And that's where he taught that lesson there. So, again, if we can kind of come back to one more piece here, I could show just on the corner there. You can't see it now, but I'm going to show you in the next picture what was the Eastern Gate. Way up there. The next slide. Oh, sorry. So yeah, way up here for you online folks. And now when we see the next slide, here we go. Oh, I have the slide, sorry. Oops. Oh, I thought it was there. Oh, I don't think it made it. All right, I'll have to show you in another picture, or maybe it's, nope. Yeah, there it is. Okay, here, what I was trying to show you is, see, it looks like a little castle bit, and there looks like an archway, like you should be able to walk through there, but it's been bricked up. Yeah, somebody wants to say something? Nope, okay. Saladin, the Muslim Sultan, who is famous for kind of winning the first crusades against the Christian Crusaders. He's also famous, Francis of Assisi met Saladin, and Saladin said to Francis, if I'd ever met another Christian like you, I would convert to Christianity, but there's no threat of that because there aren't any other Christians like you. Saladin had that gate bricked in so that no one could enter, because the Jewish prophecy is that the Messiah would enter through the Golden Gate or the Eastern Gate. So he bricked it in. So a couple of things that are unfortunate for Saladin. One, I figure if the Messiah is coming in, the Messiah is going to come in whether it's bricked or not. But two, he missed it by about 1,000 years because Jesus had already come through that gate. So the story that we tell as the triumphal entry would have been through there. Jesus came down the Mount of Olives and then up into Jerusalem, entering into the temple via the Eastern Gate or the Golden Gate. And so he bricked it in, but it was a little late, a little too late. But back to that picture, these tombs that are these bunch of white concrete down here are also tombs, but they're not Jewish tombs. They're Muslim tombs, because the Muslims know that Jews believe that to be around the dead or to touch the dead makes you spiritually unclean. And so a lot of Muslims have been buried there at the Golden Gate to discourage the Messiah from trying to come in Jerusalem. So there you go. We probably won't go right there. One year, I did have a couple of parishioners late at night go out to those tombs by the Golden Gate because they thought it would be a cool place to go. And then an Israeli soldier put a gun in their face and asked them a lot of questions. So I would recommend you don't go there, or at least if you do go there, don't go there at night. One last piece. Wherever the Golden Gate would have been at the time of Jesus, we're not exactly sure because the wall was destroyed and rebuilt a couple of times. So it might have been right there. It might have been a little farther south. It might have been a little farther north. All right. So let me go back. So coming down the Mount of Olives, this is a little church that was been built on the side of the Mount of Olives. And it has a Latin name, but when translated, it means the tears of God. And it was designed to look a bit like a teardrop. And it commemorates that passage in the Gospels where Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. So if you go inside and you're sitting there like in a little chapel and you're looking forward at a communion table, there's a big window up behind you and it frames Jerusalem kind of beautifully. And this is kind of on the walk down the Mount of Olives. It's not always open. If it's open, we'll go in. If it's not, we will move a little further south because we'll walk down the Mount of Olives. We'll have the bus will drop us off at the top and we'll walk down. Again, generally along a way that Jesus or the disciples would have come down off the Mount of Olives if they're going into Jerusalem. And as we get down to the bottom, we'll reach an area that is known to be roughly the space of the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is the garden as it is today. And these are olive trees. When we were together last time, we talked about the olive wood, which is a very popular kind of souvenir thing. It comes from these trees. These particular olive wood trees are over 2,000 years old. So they would have been growing in the garden when Jesus was praying in the garden, which is remarkable. I love that. All right, yeah, so here we are back here. We kind of see the Dome of the Rock. We see the, I guess it's the eastern wall of the Temple Mount. We'll talk later about the western wall. And we'll be back and forth around this area quite a bit. Jerusalem, like the old city of Jerusalem, is not very large. Maybe 3 miles in circumference. So for the people here in Lakeland, that's not much bigger than Lake Hollingsworth, right? You can walk Lake Hollingsworth, you can walk the old city, which is walled and very, I don't know, Middle Eastern. Ah, finally, this is a proper good picture. Who put together this slideshow? Oh yeah, that was me. So here's a close-up of the Eastern Gate, or what's also known as the Golden Gate. And you can see where people used to be able to go through there, but it's been bricked in. And the bricked in part of the job happened over 1,000 years ago, which gives you a sense of how old the place is. That's a pretty nice picture. I'm proud of that one, even if I am the one who found it on the internet. There you go. You can, yeah. I mean, so when we're going back and forth, I mean, we're going to be all around Jerusalem and we'll be up on the Temple Mount and we'll walk on the Temple Mount itself. We'll walk around right above where that is. But to be on this side, kind of in the cemetery section, generally, it's obvious that we're not Muslims there to visit dead loved ones. And yeah, it's not really a touristy spot.
That picture looks like you're standing on the wall now.
It does a bit. I'm here to protect the Golden Gate from a bunch of would-be vandalizers or something. Protect them from Matt Sheffield. All right. So let's see if the next picture. So again, I'd said a lot about that we're going to be in the general area of things, not necessarily like X marks the spot, because you can't do that with kind of things that are, I mean, in the time of Jesus, that's 2,000 years ago, but if it's in the time of Isaiah, which some of the things we'll see is the time of Isaiah, so that's 2,600 years ago. Some of the things we see are in the time of Abraham, so that's some 3,000 years ago, right? But this actually is an X marks the spot kind of thing. Like if you're coming from the Garden of Gethsemane down through the Kidron Valley and back up towards Jerusalem, this was kind of the only path And this dates to the 1st century. So when Jesus was arrested that night in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was taken by the soldiers to the house of Caiaphas, it would have been up these steps, which is pretty remarkable. Because again, it's rare. I mean, those teaching steps, Jesus would have been there pretty close. We could walk back and forth and see if we can step on the same place Jesus did or something. But yeah, this is a pretty remarkable space. These particular steps are next to this church, which has a Latin name again, but it translates as the rooster crow, because it is a reference to the rooster crowing 3 times before Peter denies Jesus, Peter denying Jesus 3 times before the rooster crows. There we go. And so this is it's a beautiful church. We'll spend some time there. The reason this particular church is built where it is because they found some ancient holding cells that would have been used to keep prisoners. And so again, there might be a couple of other places on this hill here is called Mount Zion. So you've heard of that all your life, I guess. But so this is Mount Zion, and this is like halfway up. So there are a few other places along here that could have been excellent places for. Do you need me? Thank you. A few other places that could have been the house of Caiaphas. And if I'm arguing with a bunch of academics, I might argue for another spot actually, but there's not a nice church that's built there. So, and that spot doesn't have the ancient kind of holding cells that this spot has. So one of the things that we'll do here is, we'll go into the church. It's a beautiful sanctuary, but then we'll go down, like to the basement, and then down to like below the basement, all the way down to the bedrock into one of those ancient holding cells. And if it wasn't there, it was somewhere close to there that Jesus was jailed the night before his crucifixion. And so when we get down there, we'll have someone read Psalm 88, which is a psalm that it cries out to God, have the Psalter having felt kind of forsaken by God. And then we'll turn the lights out, and it's like utterly dark. I don't know if you've done any spelunking or ever been in a cave, but when your flashlight goes out, there's no light, like none. And it's an experience to think, what was it like the night for Jesus, the night before everything went completely bad. But anyway, it's a great place. Any comments about the churches of the Galiantu, Ange? Okay.
I want to say that when we were there, frequently you'd hear roosters crowing.
Oh yeah, good point. So we'll actually hear a rooster crow, and hopefully none of you will deny that you know Jesus before that happens. So we won't try and mimic that part of Peter's life. So this lady, her name is Josephine, and she is an Assyrian Orthodox nun. Now, you probably don't know much about the Assyrian Orthodox, because unlike our towns that have like a Baptist church and a Methodist church and a Presbyterian church and a Pentecostal church, we typically don't have Assyrian Orthodox churches. But Josephine was born in Nineveh. Her first language is Aramaic or Syriac. It's a form of Aramaic, which is the language Jesus spoke. Like in the Gospel of Mark, wants to cite Jesus, like quote Jesus, it'll say something in Aramaic, but then it always translates it into Greek, which suggests that Mark was writing for people who didn't know Aramaic. And Mark also has to always explain the Jewish festivals, which suggests that Mark was originally writing for an audience that wasn't Jewish. So it would be if your family was Puerto Rican and you tried to say something in Spanish to explain Three Kings Day, and you felt you then need to have to translate the Spanish and then also explain what Three Kings Day is. That's kind of Mark trying to write the gospel, right? He's always having to translate the Aramaic, and he's always having to explain the Jewish holidays. So in any case, this lady's name is Josephine. Gail, she was by training a nurse. And I don't know if we have any other nurses. Anne, yeah. And she is by training a nurse, although kind of second career, she recommitted her life to God and became a nun and was assigned to this church where she's standing here. St. Mark's is the name of it, and it's in the old city of Jerusalem. What she's pointing to is the Lord's Prayer has been written there in Aramaic. Of course, we don't even have that in Greek. Like in the New Testament, we have the Lord's Prayer in Greek. So that's how we've received it. But most likely, it was originally spoken in Aramaic, which is what this is. And Josephine was always, she's retired and she doesn't live there anymore. So we won't see her unless she happens to be visiting. That'd be great. But she was always very happy when I visited in the past to sing for us. She wanted to sing the Lord's Prayer, and she would do it in Aramaic because she thought we as English speakers should hear what the Lord's Prayer sounded like when Jesus originally taught his disciples to pray it. And I always liked that about her. Another quick testimony about Josephine here is when she came to St. Mark's, she was cleaning the church one day and praying, and she asked God, this is her testimony. I've heard her tell it multiple times. She asked God, why do I never see miracles in my life like I read about in the New Testament? And about that time, a man walks in, and he's kind of wanting to know about the church. So as it turns out, he is Russian by nationality, but he's Jewish by ethnicity, and he's Christian by faith. So if you followed all that, right? So he's from Russia, but he's Jewish, again, by family, by ethnicity, but he's Christian by faith. And so he's kind of a pilgrim, not unlike what we will be when we go. And so she gives him a tour, and there's a particular icon, we'll look at it here in a second, that's there that it's famous for. And their basement is quite famous as well. Funny thing to have to be famous, but they have a basement, it's very famous. And so he got the full tour. So about a month later, he's back, and he's got questions for Josephine, except now he's only speaking in Russian, and he refuses to speak in English, which was one of only two languages that Josephine spoke. Like Josephine didn't speak Hebrew, she didn't speak Russian, she spoke Syriac, and she spoke English. That's her only two languages. And so he's frustrated with her because she's saying English, please, and he's frustrated with, or she's saying English, please, and he's frustrated, or anyway, they're frustrated with each other. One saying English, please, the other saying Russian, please. So she prays, Lord, help me. And in walks this Israeli tour guide, because all the tour guides bring people by these places, right? And so all the Christians, workers in these locations know the tour guides. And he's like, Josephine, I was with my wife. We're in the market, which is just around the corner. And I really felt like I should come see you. Are you in need? And this guy does speak Russian. Like, he leads tours of Russian folks. And so she said what I've told you to him. And so he talks to the guy. And the guy said, look, I was here a month ago, and this same nun gave me a tour of the church in Russian. And now she's refusing to talk to me. She doesn't have time for me. Josephine said, I didn't speak in Russian. I spoke in English, and you spoke to me in English. So according to Josephine, they had had a conversation in English. And according to this man, they had had a conversation in Russian. Now, you can take that for what you want it, right? People have testimonies that claim all sorts of things. But Josephine believes that she experienced what was in Acts chapter 2, where some people spoke and other people said, how is it that we hear the mighty works of God in our own language? So there you go. That's Josephine's testimony. Pardon? Oh, is that a picture that we're sharing or? Oh yeah. So if you can see, oh no, not there. All right. Yeah, you were there for a second, Ange. Hold it back up. I don't know. It's not showing up here. Oh, there it is.
We see it.
Okay. It's not showing on this screen. All right, let's go back.
And Gail.
So this is that same door that the Mosers were standing in front of. So this first one on the right is on that corner, whatever that's called, Syriac something. I can't read the sign, street sign. So you turn that little corner and there's the doors. And then, of course, if you go past the doors, you just kind of go up the road. The road kind of turns around. So these roads, a lot of the little roads in the old city, you couldn't travel by car. They're only by foot. And so this particular church has been there about 1,500 years. It's built over the ruins of an older church that was there before. And so here is what is now the basement of St. Mark's, but would have been in the time of Jesus a second story room because of the stratification when things are around for a while and get destroyed and they get built up on and back and forth, so that you get kind of multiple layers or strata that archaeologists will work their way down through. So what's, again, the level of what their basement is the level of what would have been a second story room in the first century. And according to the tradition, this was Mark's, the home of John Mark, or technically the home of his mother. So, you know, in the book of Acts, John Mark goes on a missions trip with Barnabas and Paul. It's Paul's first missionary trip as a Christian. And they go to Cyprus. And then when they get up to Anatolia, up to Turkey, John Mark goes home and it ticks Paul off. So the next time they're going to go on a missions trip, Barnabas is like, hey, I've got John Mark, let's go. And Paul's like, no, John Mark can't come because he wimped out halfway through the last one. So I'm not taking him this time. And Barnabas is like, well, I'm the boss here. And Paul's like, you're not my boss. And this is a paraphrase. You can read it in the book of Acts. And so they went separate ways. So Barnabas takes John Mark back to Cyprus, and Paul takes Timothy into southern Galatia. And they kind of divide and conquer in terms of the missionary efforts. What we don't know at that point, that we will find out if you keep reading the New Testament, is that Barnabas and Paul are cousins. So I'm imagining Barnabas' mom probably told him he had to take his cousin. That's how I think it went down. Like, you take John Mark with you. And he's like, I don't think Paul wants to. And it's like, who's Paul, right? This is Barnabas and Paul missionary endeavors. Is it Paul and Barnabas? No, it's Barnabas and Paul. So you take John Mark. So it's interesting, as Luke tells the story, as they first start to travel, it's always Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul, Barnabas and Paul, until they have this about halfway through, once they leave Cyprus and they get up to southern Galatia or Anatolia, then it becomes Paul and Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas. It's like Paul got a promotion somewhere along the way. But anyway, John Mark apparently did not know that being a lifelong missionary was an option vocationally, and had left after they left Cyprus. He was apparently a college student who thought he was on a short-term missions trip. We have a lot of college students that go on short-term mission trips, also known really as cross-cultural educational experiences. I'm not exactly sure how much missions goes on in 10 days, more like a vacation, but that's not really what this is about. All right, so we'll go down here into this basement and we'll read Acts chapter 2, and I'll probably speak in tongues. You'll be invited to do so yourself. It's a pretty nice place. I've never been there where I didn't get emotional. There is another place that evangelicals often go to commemorate, again, the upper room, except that it's in a second-story building today, which means it would have been about 30 to 50 feet floating in the air in the ancient world. So it's absolutely impossible that that's actually the place. Yet, if you talk to your friends who have gone before, there's a good chance that they've gone there. It's over, again, what the Jews commemorate as the tomb of David, but talking about commemorating a place that we know something happened, we should do something for it. It's like the Washington Monument. It doesn't have very little to do with actually George Washington at that particular place. It's a monument that commemorates George Washington, right? Anyway, I do love this place. Also in this church is this particular icon, which has been reproduced in a ton of different places. This is a very ancient icon. Most scholars would date it to the 2nd century, which is really quite early. The church that has it dates it to the 1st century, which is possible. It takes a little bit of faith to believe that. But again, it takes faith to believe a lot of things that we believe in. And according to the tradition, this icon was painted by Luke, who wrote Luke and Acts. And Mary, this is Mary and Jesus, it is believed, again, according to the tradition, that Mary sat for this portrait, that this is a picture of Mary. For the longest time, Christian icons did depict like an adult-looking Jesus, just smaller. And it has to do with early Christian councils that argue about Jesus is fully human and fully divine, and kind of depicting him as fully human, they kind of depicted him as like just a small adult. And so that's why you get these very adult-looking features on child-sized Jesuses on the laps of Mary. Like, it's hard to tell from this picture, but because it's been, all the ornate stuff. But if you look real close, I mean, that's a full-blown adult Jesus. I mean, he's got a full beard. Looks like he's getting ready to teach or heal somebody or something. But anyway, I've got a copy of this in my office, but the original one hangs on the wall there at St. Mark's. This is kind of a close-up of the Cardo, or like Main Street, of what would have been going through Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. So again, this is probably 20 feet below the street level. So you can kind of see, there's a staircase over here, and that's the street level up there. So this is pretty far below it, again, in terms of strata. And this is somewhat reconstructed. I don't have a close-up, but they have some of the like tiled road has been remade, but then they didn't remake all of it, so you'd know exactly what it looked like when the archaeologists found it. But they wanted to remake some of it, so they give you an idea of what it looked like. So these columns, it wasn't like they were digging down and they found those columns standing straight up. The columns have been replaced. But then there were shops along the way, and then you can kind of see where they were. And then the one at the far end has been reconstructed. So this is kind of a typical road in an ancient Roman city. It ran perfectly north and south, and it would have had these shops on either side with colonnades going down the middle. So we'll go to Beit Shan, which is a very large Roman city in Jerusalem, not in Jerusalem, in Israel. By far the largest archaeological site is Beit Shan. It's one of the 10 cities of the Decapolis. And we'll see it's real massive, and it expands pretty far. We'll see lots of different things: Roman baths, colosseums, theaters, cardos, everything. But this is in Jerusalem, and I wanted to show it for a couple of reasons. One, because this is what it would have been like when Jesus got there. He would have walked down the road like this. But then two, I want you to think about other Roman cities that you know about from the New Testament. Like, let's take, for example, Corinth. So we know when Paul gets to Corinth that he's working in a shop, probably like one of these, kind of shallow, but one of these little places, and he's sewing canvas, right? He's a tent maker. Possibly he's not even in a shop itself. He's actually out in a little tent, like in front of a shop. So think of like a farmer's market, right? So he's sewing all day, trying to make a living, bivocational minister. And then a few shops down is the copper maker. Now, the problem with copper is you don't heat it when you mold it. You just bang it. So whether you're making a bowl or whether you're making a mirror, you can make a pretty nice mirror out of copper. Like if you think of a brass instrument, the reflection you see in it, imagine if that was flat. Pretty decent. This is before modern day mirrors. Making a mirror, making a bowl, making a helmet, right? You have the metal and you have the form you want it, and you just beat it with a hammer. So the sound of that would be like the sound of your toddler who got into the pots and pans and just bang, 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 which would, of course, would have been horrific. Like we all like to tell ourselves that we're really patient and we don't yell at kids. And then, our kids do something like that. We're like, stop that. So Paul, as he goes to write to the Corinthians, probably having been sewing canvas all day long and with a headache that, he's dying from because he's listening to that guy hit that copper all day. He says, look, speak in tongues all you want to, but if you don't have love, it's like banging a gong or a cymbal. So like it comes from a life that's lived in a city that looked like this, in roads like this, and shops like this. So the amount of, cultural realization that we'll have is just kind of off the chart. So you can see the Dome of the Rock here. We are now in Jerusalem looking east. So that's the Mount of Olives, the mountain behind. And what's in the foreground is the Western Wall. I grew up calling it the Wailing Wall. I don't know if you all have heard it that, because people, quote unquote, wail, meaning they cry out in prayer. Wailing, I guess, has taken a connotation that's somewhat negative. And so generally speaking, it's kind of impolite to say Wailing Wall, and we should say Western Wall. And it's called the Western Wall because it's a part of the temple or the Temple Mount that is visible today, that would have been part of the temple that Jesus went to, or part of the second temple. I mean, the Jews don't commemorate it today because Jesus was there. They don't believe in Jesus, but the second temple. And so we'll be able to go all the way down, like right up to the wall, be able to touch it. It's a common practice to kind of write down a prayer and kind of stick it in between the cracks. If it is split between male and female, so the guys on our side, they have these little paper yarmulkes, the little like beanie hats. So you don't have to wear one of those, but you do have to have your head covered. So if you just have like a ball cap on, that would suffice. Or I don't know, any hat would suffice. But if you don't have a hat on, you will need to cover your head to kind of walk in. It's not atypical to see like a bar mitzvah kind of taking place. The women will go on the other side. This is not a point at which we can negotiate our sense of gender equality. It's kind of non-negotiable. This is the men and this is the women. Yeah, I do. It is the larger side is made available for men. Yes, Angela, that's correct. So this is a little more close up. So you see that the artificial metal wall that's there on the foreground is for the women, and on the background there is for the men. It is about 3 times as large. And there also is a really cool synagogue and library that's back underneath there that, again, the men have access to that the women don't have access to. Sorry. It's a practice that found its way into Christianity as well. The question was, why is that? So this idea of kind of separation of the genders kind of in the midst of worship. So there were times, and even Christian circles, that men sit on one side and women sit on the other. I went to an Orthodox service one time, and it was in a monastery. And so the places of worship were actually separate rooms. So everyone in the room I was in was male, and there was a separate room that the women were in. And at another point, we all processed to this central area, but then we processed back to actually receive communion. Yeah, it's an interesting practice, So you can kind of tell from that picture the difference between the relatively small and more universally sized, smaller stones at the top and the larger stones towards the bottom. It's the difference between building at the time of the Crusades versus building at the time of the Romans. I do have a handout that I'll send you, and it kind of shows a diagram of the whole Western Wall, and then the relatively very small, it's outlined in red, the section that we face. So again, like where we will stand in front of it and be able to touch it would have been a good 30 feet above the ground. Like the ground has been filled in over the years. Like there used to be a pretty significant valley on this side of the Temple Mount. One of these times we will, a very short walk from here is an entrance to a tunnel, an underground tunnel, and it goes down, 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 and then makes its way north along this wall. And we will get to the far northwest corner. And it's the foundation stones of the Temple Mount. And I think I might have said this before, but in terms of size, they're kind of extraordinary. Like the largest stone in Stonehenge is 17 tons. The largest stone in the pyramids of Giza, which a lot of us are going to in Cairo, are 40 tons. The two largest stones in the Temple Mount are 600 tons each. Like Herod the Great was known for being a master builder, and his reputation went kind of through the Roman Empire. And his crowning achievement, he built a lot of great things: Caesarea Maritima, the port city, lots of palaces, lots of fortresses, Masada, but his crowning achievement was the temple. And when Jesus's disciples got there, they say, "Master, look at these stones." Yeah, I mean, it was the kind of thing that you'd have to come from all around the world to see what he's built here. It was like a destination. It was like something to go and see. At that same point, where those two largest stones are, that was the foundation of the northwest corner of the whole Temple Mount. And since there's a valley, although it's mostly filled in now, there was a valley to its west and a valley to its east. There was also a valley to its south called Hinnom, by the Hebrews, Gehenna, by the Greeks. And it's Jesus references it as hell, right? So we'll go back and forth through it a couple times, and those will be long days, but we will be able to say to one another, we've been back and forth through hell a few times today. So that's okay. But coming from the north, the lay of the land is such that it's still going slightly uphill, right? You're on a mountain range. And so the Temple Mount, as a place of civic gathering and law and worship, because they didn't have the separation of religion and state, right? It's all melded into one. So it was a great place for the Jewish priests to direct worship, for the Sanhedrin to meet for their laws. But as a fortress, it was naturally defendable on the east, west, and south because there are these valleys, deep valleys. You had to come uphill and there was a wall, so you can't really conquer it. But from the north, you're coming at it at a pretty level altitude, if that's the right term, level plain. And so Herod built a fortress there, and he named it after his friend, Mark Antony, the Mark Antony, not the one that was married to Jennifer Lopez, but the one that was married to Cleopatra. And for you Oasians, our Caleb Anthony, our youth pastor, his dad is named Mark. That's also a different Mark Antony. So yeah, name for Mark Antony, the Antonian fortress. Lots of things happened there. When Paul's arrested in Jerusalem, he's kept at the Antonian fortress. And there's that group of guys who said, we're not going to eat or drink until we kill Paul. And the Romans find out about it. And so they whisk him away to Caesarea, which we talked about that last week. But maybe more importantly to us, more important than Paul, it was at the Antonian fortress where Jesus was first tried before Pilate. Right? He was kept the night before at Caiaphas's house. But the morning of his crucifixion, he's taken to the Antonian fortress. So it's there that he would be scourged. He'd be whipped. It's there that he would be found guilty. And it's from that point that he would have to start to carry his cross out of the city to Golgotha. So there is, just to the north of the Temple Mount, a convent named Ekehomo, which means in Latin, behold the man. It is Pilate's reference to Jesus. And in their basement, which would have, again, kind of been the ground floor at the time of Jesus, we'll go there too. And it's it's the first station of the Stations of the Cross. If you don't know what the Stations of the Cross are, there are 14 stations. It's called the Via Dolorosa, the Way of Suffering. And it marks these various places along the way from the Antonian fortress to Golgotha and the tomb of Jesus. And so we'll walk the Via Dolorosa. We'll look at we'll stop and I'll send out another handout as well, or you can just Google it if you need to, if you're anxious to do it before I share it with you. But you can study a bit about the 14 stations, but it starts there. And in the ground, like etched in the stone, there are a couple of games of chance that are there that the Romans would have played. And we don't know if that's the same game that gets referenced in the Gospels where it says that they cast lots for his clothes, but it is a game of chance at the Antonian fortress played by Roman soldiers, which I think is pretty remarkable. So here's a sign for Via Dolorosa. It's written here in Hebrew, in Arabic, and then in Latin. And the particular locations along the way are marked by these signs. So this is number 5. It's marked by Roman numerals. So number 5, I forget exactly what is the 5th station of the cross. Anybody know the Stations of the Cross by memory? Angela? What's the 5th station of the cross? We'll see whose Google's the fastest. I will say this, at the 4th station of the cross, I think is the best pizza that's for sale in the old city. That has nothing to do with Jesus's way of suffering, other than it's a really good pizza shop right there by the 4th station. What's that? Oh yeah, so this marks the space where Simon starts to carry the cross. You know that part of the story. So most of the Stations of the Cross we can point to particular passages of scripture that are being commemorated. There are a couple of them that are part of church tradition that don't necessarily have a particular passage in scripture that corresponds with. All right, just a few more. This is the like a bird's eye view of the Via Dolorosa. So you can see it to the far right, kind of the stations 1, 2, 3, take a left-hand turn, 4, take a right-hand turn, 5, 6, 7, 8 up a little path, so you have to backtrack a bit. As is 9, there's a couple ways to get there. So from 9, you can go on top of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and then take a path into the church and down some stairs through a sanctuary, or you can come back down and around to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which Holy Sepulchre just means Holy Tomb. And there's a particular chapel, again, commemorated as the tomb of Jesus. So if you can make sense of this, in the bottom right-hand corner, it says Temple Mount and it says Dome of the Rock. So we've seen that picture a lot. This is oriented north, south, east, west. So to the right of our picture that we can't see would have been the Mount of Olives. And now to the bottom of our picture is the south. And so the western wall, if you're following the little wall around the Dome of the Rock, the western wall that we'll stand on is just south of our picture, or just below this picture. So we're to the north here of it, and we start here at Ekehomo, and we make our way down and turn and come up, and then we'll come up here. Hopefully we'll go this way. It's my preference, but if we can't, we'll come around. So the last 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, the last 5 stations of the cross are inside the church, inside the Holy Sepulchre. So it's a massive complex that kind of goes on and on, left and right, up and down, multiple levels. There's some levels that have very heavy kind of crusader influence. When you first walk in the main doors, you kind of go up some steps to your right to what would have been the highest point on the bedrock, likely where the crosses would have been placed. And you can work your way to the left, one of the more lower places, and you'll see this. Nope, that's not what you'll see. This is on top. So if we do take this path, once you get to kind of station 9, there's an interesting water cistern right there that I love. But anyway, you can come what's on top of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, like on the roof, and you'll see this. There is a Ethiopian Orthodox monastery. So they're Ethiopian monks. It's a whole separate part of Christianity, and they live here. I am a little bothered by the fact that the Ethiopians are placed on the roof, kind of outside the building, and everyone else has access kind of inside the building. But I don't know. Racism seems to be baked into our traditions too. This, on the other hand, is the Holy Sepulchre itself. I know it looks relatively ornate. It would not have looked like that. But this particular building, and it's looking great, actually. It's just recently being refurbished. When I first saw it, it was like solid black from soot and was falling apart. So they did a great job restoring it. But this particular building was built by Helena, the mother of Constantine, the Roman emperor. And you walk in there and there's a stone slab, but it's been covered up, so you can't see it. But yeah, it's thought to be like where Jesus's body was laid. This is the front side. On the back side, there is a little bit of, it looks like a walk-in closet that is a Coptic sanctuary. You can't really get in it. It's just like a closet. But I have been to some worship services there. If you've never been to a Coptic Orthodox service, that's an experience. They're long. They're about 2.5 hours. And you're not allowed to sit nor put your hands in your pockets because you can't worship God with hands in your pockets. You have to worship God with your hands available. What else? The only time I've been to worship there was like 5:30 a.m. I was interested in it. I had someone on the trip who was very interested in it. I didn't want her to go alone. So Angela and I went. And I'm pretty sure a couple of the younger priests did fall asleep during the worship service. I did notice one of them sitting down. I'm not sure how he got away with that. But the head priest, who looked like he stepped out of Indiana Jones film, you know, he has the skull cap with the cords on the side, and he has a really long beard, and he was bent over with age, and he's gone through his liturgy, which is really quite long. I'm not exactly sure what language it was in, but at the end, the handful of people who were there to worship, he served them communion, and then he looks at me, obviously not looking very Coptic, in my, Columbia windbreaker, and he looks at me and he points his finger. He doesn't point it straight at me because his finger's all crooked. You got to think this little old guy, right? So he points his crooked finger at me and he says, "Christian?" And I say, "Yes." And he waves me forward and serves me communion. And in a tradition that communion is just for those who've been baptized into your church. That was an amazing ecumenical inclusive statement, I think, by that old priest. He didn't need to do that. But he thought if I was Christian, I shouldn't go away not being served. And so that was great. I'll never forget it. And so even when I serve communion today, I often think of him, right? In the way in which he was a host at that table, I try to be a host at the table. And we will take communion a couple of different times, probably twice, I think is the plan, while we're in Israel. There are particular places that are just kind of right for it. There's another possible location that's commemorated as the tomb of Christ, and it's in a beautiful garden, and they have these nice little like amphitheaters kind of set up with chairs and communion tables. So we'll do it there. That's a good place to do it. All right. This is a nice picture also of the church. So all of this, the tower there and both domes, everything you see actually in the forefront of this picture is part of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So it was originally built by Helena, Constantine's mom, but it has been refurbished and remodeled and expanded and refurbished and remodeled and expanded every 50 to 100 years since the year 400. So important place. This is another, like that tower that you're seeing there, the bell tower. Now we're down on the ground. You can see it there, like we're down looking up at it. So we'll go up this ramp through here, and that takes you to a wonderful old section of the city with lots of shops. Oh yeah, let me show that again. With lots of shops. If you go up there and take a right, there's this pottery shop that Angela has bought a lot of things from, but you might not want to go with her because she really negotiated that guy down. And so I'm not sure she'd be a good person to go in with if that guy remembers her. But you can go left, you hit St. David Street, lots of cool places. There's no section of the city that will make you feel more like you're in a Middle Eastern city. I want to, but I can't walk through that section of the city without the theme of Indiana Jones playing in my head. Dun, 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 dun. I want like a whip or something. So in this picture, down to the right are the doorways, and you can't quite tell it from here. Like that person is probably a regular sized person, granted they're not standing next to the door. Those doors are about 12 feet tall. So think, we like tall doors in our houses too. So these are really tall doors. The doors themselves are about 800 years old. That's the last remodel of this section of the church. And that is the only way to kind of access the church. Like even if we come down through that other sanctuary from the Ethiopian monastery, we still exit into this plaza. And then we go from that plaza into the church building. So those doors are the doors. And I said this one night, we had a gathering at the house. I'm not sure if everybody was able to make it, but the keys to that door are held by a Muslim family. And they've been held by that same Muslim family for hundreds of years. It's been passed down from father to son. And the reason a Muslim family holds the keys is because the Christians were fighting too much as to who should get to hold the keys. So the Catholics wanted the keys, and the Orthodox wanted the keys, and the Armenians wanted the keys, and they couldn't decide. And so a neutral family was deemed to be the best option. And I was there once. I told that story to a group of students from the college, and I was there and I saw the guy who currently holds the key. And I'm like, hey, that's the guy who has the key to the door. And they got all excited and they kind of rushed him. And so we all surrounded him to get a picture with him. And he was excited. And he's like, I can't believe you're all Muslims. To which our kids said, well, we're not Muslims, we're Christians. We just thought it was cool that you had this key. He was a little disappointed, but he took a picture with us nonetheless. All right. I think that might be it. So for next week, just quickly, we'll wrap up here. We had talked about watching Masada. That was the plan. And then when I went to look, apparently Masada is a 6-hour miniseries. So who knew? I had forgotten. We knew, but we forgot. So we are not now planning to watch Masada. That's 6 hours is too long for a session. So what we will do next week, instead of watching Masada, you can live stream it or buy the DVD and watch it yourself. What we'll do next week is I'll give a lesson on Masada and on the areas in Egypt that we'll be visiting: Mount Sinai, St. Catherine's Monastery, and the pyramids in Cairo. Right. So we'll focus on that part for our fourth and final session. Final session. Yes.
There's a video on YouTube that you can look up for Masada.
Okay.
So I haven't watched it all, but I did find one. So if people are interested, you might want to try to look at that even.
Yeah, that's great. And it's like a documentary type?
It looked like that's what it was going to be. I just, like I said, I haven't really got to look at it, but it may be something of interest.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. So let's make sure everybody heard that Gail's recommending a YouTube kind of documentary on Masada. The mini series is not a documentary. It's like a not fictional, but it's historical fiction, right? It tells the story of the Roman general who would later become emperor of Rome, who led the attack on Masada, and of the Jews who defended Masada. It's part of the end of the First Jewish War. It's a really fascinating story. We'll look more into the details next week, and we'll show you pictures of what you'll see when we get there, and how we'll get up and down the mountainside. One of the folks who had planned on going with us, but it's not going to be able to go now, had said that he wanted to hike Masada, which is a fun thing to do, but we're on a little tighter time frame. So our plan is not to actually walk it. We're going to just ride the cable car. Yeah, it's easier. And it's air conditioned. And I don't want any of you to pass out.
It's a magnificent place.
It really is. Yeah. Lots of history. Interestingly enough, lots of like ancient technology. It's pretty fascinating. And for those of you who are interested in contemporary Israeli kind of culture and practice, it's a kind of a fascinating place for that as well.
And
all right.
That day is one of our best days. We go to Qumran, En Gedi, Masada, and then end the day at the Dead Sea.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There you go. It's a whole trip in one day. Not really. The days are full days, but we're not paying all this money and taking all this time off our rest of our lives to go and spend an hour doing something. I mean, there will be some free time and downtime each day, and there's one whole free day, but we do our best to maximize the daylight hours and see what we can see. Yeah, you'll enjoy Masada. I've never known anyone not to be fascinated with it. It's something to see. All right, so the plan is one more session next week, same time, same location, and we'll study Masada, Sinai, and a little bit more about Egypt. Is Steve with us?
No, he's at a Tennessee basketball game.
All right, well, go Vols.
Go Big
Does anyone
Orange.
have any
Hey,
questions?
look at this. I look like I'm in my Vol sweater.
I saw that. Don't look at my colors. They look like Florida colors, but this is Tennessee Wesleyan's colors, and I taught today. So,
all right. Well, I hope Steve enjoys watching his team win. Let him know that we are going to talk
41-28. They're winning.
Okay. Let him know we will talk about Egypt next week, which he had asked for last week.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask about the places for communion, and so you mentioned one. And what is the other location?
Yeah, so there's a couple of possibilities. Had I attended, I don't want to out you here, Kathy, but my intention was to have you lead us in communion at the garden tomb.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of the best place.
And then would I bring some wine and like?
Actually, no, they provide it all there.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we'll do is, it's not atypical for the olive wood shop that we go to in Bethlehem. They'll give us these little like individualized olive wood cups. So I'll bring them and I give them to the folks there at the garden tomb. And when they go to prep it, they'll use those olive wood cups that we've just gotten from Bethlehem. And then we'll all take our own cup as opposed to the common cup. That's really good for COVID anyway, I think. But it's typical for folks to do there anyway. And then people take their olive wood cup home with them. So the one that you use in communion there, you'll take home with you. So they'll have the bread, the wine, the cups, all of that would be prepped for us. So there's some stuff to see, and it's owned by a British organization, oddly enough. And they give you a little kind of, I'm going to call it a mandatory tour, but that's going to make it sound harsher than what it is. But they give you a tour and they pitch you the best case they can as to why they think the garden tomb is a better potential site for the death and resurrection of Jesus as opposed to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a little funny. It's like not a competition, I don't think, but I guess it is. And so after we hear that, there are some interesting things to see and to hear about some ancient archaeology, not ancient, but some archaeologists from generations ago and their arguments. And then we will walk into a tomb, first century tomb that's there. And so that's pretty remarkable. And then when we come out, they'll take us to, there's several little, I don't know, like little grottos that are around the garden. And they'll take one that's appropriate for a group our size. There's 22 of us. And then from there, we'll have our service.
Great.
Yeah.
And then I also wonder, in looking at the documents that are posted for our accounts on EO, it says that we'll get the daily schedule a little bit closer to the trip. Is that correct? So I was just wanting to.
Yes. Right before the trip, you'll get, well, he told me yesterday, actually, it'll come via email, the itinerary, but they will send you something in the mail that's like they give us luggage tags and those kind of things. So you'll get something in the mail and an email too with flight information, the itinerary, those things. Okay. And then 24 hours before we leave, we also have to fill out a health form with the whole COVID kind of restrictions, but that's just a form that you'll carry with you, with your passport and your passport, vaccine passport.
Can you remind me which days we're supposed to be in Jerusalem?
Well, I could. Let me count the days. 2, 3. I think we'll get there on the Tuesday. So that's, I don't know. I'll have to look.
Okay. I was just looking at, like, there's an Anglican church in the Old Town, but, I just wanted to kind of start seeing what churches are there when we have our free time. And
I'll send you exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I particularly love that Anglican church in the Old City. Especially there's 3 stained glass windows and they represent, can you pause or mute yourself back there, Ange? They represent Romans chapter 11, where it talks about the Jews being cut off and the Gentiles being grafted in, and then the Jews not being left behind, but they're grafted in, kind of forming one tree. And so they have 3 trees, and some of them in 3 different windows, and some of them shown these branches that are cut off, and then another branch which is grafted, and then the whole tree now made new, made whole. It's a gorgeous place. It also has, it's the whole little compound right there is really nice. It's right by the Jaffa Gate. It's across as part of the section called the City of David. And there's a little shop there that I like to go to. There's a little cafe that's really nice. The folks that run the church are just delightful. And it is the only Protestant church in the, no. It's one of two Protestant churches in the Old City. The Church of the Redeemer is Lutheran.
Great.
Yeah, it's really nice though. I mean, we should all go there actually.
I see they have a Wednesday morning Eucharist at 10:30. So
oh, there you go.
If that was our free day, I would try to do that.
We can venture there. Those of us that want to. All right, that sounds great. Anybody else? All right, sounds good. Good to be with you all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to Israel. Looking forward to it. It's getting close now. So everybody stay healthy.
Right.
And for the Warrens, you guys go ahead and get healthy. And if you're going to get COVID, get it this week.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry about that.
No, it's great.
Sorry, Carol.
I'm trying to talk Mikkel into bringing a saxophone and playing it on the street to make enough money for lunch for all of us on our free day.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Mikkel Larinaga, who's going on the trip, he's the executive pastor here at Oasis, lived for a while in Jerusalem and supported himself as a street musician. So yeah, he should definitely take a saxophone, maybe that little soprano sax. It won't take up as much space.
Yeah, it's a little teeny one.
You might get hired out for a bar mitzvah.
That's right. You might get hired out for a bar mitzvah just on the side.
So the dream.
And with his beard, it is odd how much beards are respected in that culture. Like the difference between having a beard and not having a beard is the difference of being respected and not respected. Like I might grow my beard out a little thicker, so they'll treat me.
Joseph, don't shave it.
Yeah, and Mikkel, man, with Mikkel's beard, they'll treat him like a rabbi.
Good to know.
Or
very good to know.
Or a Bedouin Sultan or something. All right.
It looks like Kathy, our free day is on Friday.
Okay.
But we are in Jerusalem. Depending on what we do, it's all very close. So if you would kind of choose that instead of what we're doing that morning, that's a possibility too.
Yeah,
okay.
We've got some flexibility.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okie dokie. Love y'all.
Thanks. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Go Vols.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody. See you in 4 weeks.
Bye.